Let's wait for 2 more minutes so that people are switching. Good evening to everybody. So yesterday we just started our discussion about international business, international financial systems, and how it plays an effective role. We were discussing about how it making impact and how it is changing the dimensions for a trade or activity for every person. So, in today's session, we'll talk about LPG model, that is liberalization, privatization, and globalization model. After talking about this model, we will discuss the international financial system. And after discussing the financial system, we will start the first institutions and then the processes. So I'm just sharing the LPG model. After this LPG model, we will switch ourselves to the understanding the concept of globalization. So let's continue. As I discuss an introduction, our industrial policy 1991 was a great change which emphasizes on our international finance and there they laid the foundation of our globalization. To understand the meaning of globalization, we first need to understand these two terms: what is liberalization, what is privatization, and what is globalization. So let's move. So we'll go through these. That is, what is contents, what are reasons for LPG model, and individually we'll highlight the meaning of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So July 1991, India has made a strategic move to open its economy towards the model of LPG. Like in our house, we have a liquid petroleum gas which burst out, and we have a supply change happens. We can use that gas for cooking. We can use that gas as explosive. We can use that gas as a source of energy. Same way, the LPG model serves to the India as a country to change its drastic industrialization forces from one act to the others. This LPG model is classified as liberalization, privatization, and globalization model. Now, why India opened its economy from 1991? Earlier it was closed, no issues. Why? Because in 1991 onwards, the India feel a pressure of excessive consumption or expenditures, excessive consumption and expenditure or heavy government borrowings. The role of government was so drastic, so heavy that out of the earnings, maximum part was going towards the consumption. Contribution to development was very limited. The scope of technological changes, the scope of uplifting people, the socio-economic effects are nil. Money what comes in is majorly outsourcing in terms of salaries and non-productive expenditures. The industries were so protected that they are not habitable towards the challenges, towards the efficiency and understanding the heat of international trade. So we have protected them like everything. And the companies were so protected that they have no fear of competition. And this no fear of competition has resulted into loss of confidence and loss of willingness to develop, grow, and change themselves. And this loss of willingness is resulted into inefficiency. Many firms they know that there is no competition. For example, in Maharashtra, we got MSCB. Now, if the only light provider is MSCB, they didn't bother about customers. They didn't bother about sentiments of customers. They didn't bother about the issues, pros and cons of the people. For them, if you want the electricity, we are the rule makers. If you want, take it our rates or you forget because there is no alternate supplier of electricity. Now, slowly and gradually in Mumbai, in Gujarat, they started with Adani's, Kirloskars, Mittals, and they become supplier of energy. And now the MSCB is in competition. They start improving themselves. They're coming with new things. They are having call centers. They are providing helps. They are messaging you regarding power failures. So the LPG model is one of the way the government want people to run, make themselves efficient, and prove that they are growing. The overprotection has led to mismanagement, lazy work, and it has resulted into increase of loss of public sector enterprises. And people consider the public sector enterprises or government organizations as their family work, where you work or do not work, your salaries are going to be counted. Your performance is not so necessary, but you will get your money what you desire. So this way, the government companies were booked as a family tradition, earning money for nothing. The overprotection and lack of competencies lead to the exploiting human capital where the talent pool is going abroad. Our foreign exchange is going low and low because the remittance from foreign and the balance of payment is negative. So our forex was in crunch and super inflations are being experienced by the people where energy resources are challenged. All this is resulted into poor economic build and lack of the stagnant growth which is desired. This resulted into a mismatch or misjudgment of economy and ultimate loss of trust and confidence which is essential for development of nation. And this way the growth is hampered and people are not so willing to change themselves for something. In a life of every person, ultimate motivation is a money. Ultimate motivation to have something, achieve something, and gain something because I'm earning extra. But since the industries are overprotected, they lack in competitiveness, they lack in eagerness to improve themselves. The best example of LPG model is State Bank of India. Earlier, if you visit the bank, they used to just pass on you from one counter to other to other and to other. So it's like you just went as a beggar for taking out your money. Now, when you're going with the privatization and globalization, they need to feel the heat from private banks. They are feeling and challenge and issues of getting customer, sustaining them, and making capital boost by major investment avenues. Because the private banks, they are competitors, they are challenging, they are techno words. They have major young capital where the diversified fields and rapid growth is achieved. And now that shifted to State Bank and they are struggling over the efficiency and they are talking about the technological innovations and practicing the new and modern theories. In short, the LPG model works you to motivate you for more better performance and aggressions. So let's talk about the first L. Liberalization talks about losing the things. Now, here losing means not giving up. Losing means whatever control I'm having. For example, if I want to start a particular business, in that business, I need to have a multiple permissions. I need to take multiple documents. For example, if I want to start a small bakery, I need to take NOC of that landlord. I need to take NOC of that location. I need to take the NOC of the next person who has an organization or house. I need to take the NOC of that particular city, village, then that particular type of industry. Then all these NOCs become a giant merger because when I'm motivated to start a business, but if you're asking me permissions, permissions, and permissions, ultimately it will demotivate me because I'm fed up that once I take a one permission, you're asking for the second. I take a second permission, you're asking for me third. Third to fourth to fifth to sixth to seventh to eight and so forth and so on. So this n number of permissions will after that mute yourself. So all these permissions will certainly make an impact and they will have demotivation to myself. For example, to get an idea, this is an hypothetical example. You are studying in a graduation college and you want to have a cultural party where you are going to invite the industrial people and you want them to address and make you learn about recent trends. So you approached your principal. Your principal says, okay, no, you approached your teacher for the permission. Teacher says talk to HOD. HOD says talk to the director. Director says talk to their academic council. Academic council says talk to the somebody others. Then you take the permission from owner. Then you take the permission of police. Then you take permission from government. I need to celebrate in 7 days a summit. But if I'm taking 7 days for getting that permissions, ultimately my morale to conduct that activity is declined. And the same thing happens about earlier things. The restrictions were so large, the people feel pathetic, people feel irritated that instead of doing the things in better way, I should stop doing the things because I'm not getting permissions. And this has resulted in a negative impact. This has resulted into a loss. This has resulted into a limitation about the people's efficiency in operations. So, talking about liberalization, we have to reduce the norms, we have to restructure the paperwork required, we have to fix a timeline that for this work, this is a deadline, and if you want, when you apply in this deadline, the work will finish. Lines, norms, they are not channelized in particular way. The work which is happening, it is always will be delayed, it will be deregularized, and the motivation or the basic interest is gone. So the first step government has done a liberalization. Liberalization has worked out on four levels: channeling the system, deciding the deadlines, making the framework or opportunities, and opening the sectors which are earlier government sectors. Now the government sectors are allowed for competition with private players. So this was the first phase. The path of liberation is relief to foreign investors, welcome them, ask them to invest in many sectors, ask them to start their businesses, open the policies and remove the restrictions, give them freedom to launch a new technology and new systems. So, in short, motivate private partnership, motivate international partnership in the organization. And then it will help me to get more and more funds. It will help me to get new technology because when the foreign collaborations will come in India, they will ultimately bring their own technology, own system, own method. And this own technology, method, or system help me to grow more faster because this will be a boosting and understanding where India is lacking. And that's why the liberalization was an first attempt to do the needful, to do the clear that how I can progress further. What are advantage of liberalization? First, I can motivate the people. I can enlarge the people by delicensing. So now if I want to start a business, instead of approaching 10, 20 people, I can directly walk in, I can get my experience, I can understand the policy, and I can directly decide where I can go and where I cannot. So one window, one place where I can get the documentations, where I get all permissions, I get all information about my business. So this overall everything is feasible. This one window or one channel will lead to less corruptions and less cost or efforts in starting an business. So more and more industries will come, more commercialization will done, and people's per capita income or benefits will increase. But what is the limitations? The limitation is suppose my kid is of 5 years age. I have protected him from 5 years to 10 years. Suddenly, I ask him to go and win the Olympic gold medal. It will be a trouble. First, I need to nourish them. I need to make them learn how to do, what to do, when to do. I need to provide the trainings. So if I suddenly open my market for other players, they will just cut down the braid lines and that will result in employment. Because if the things are not working well and the organizations they're not able to compete with the foreign players, they have to close downs. And this results in the small scales or startups as an issue. This will result in unemployment. This will create a chaos situation. This will result in an issue where there will be gap between economically sound or financially sound persons and unsound person, resulting into social disturbances and more malpractices or hidden corruptions. So liberalization has advantage. Liberalization is benefited. But if I open the suddenly, it will disturb the tempo of my economy. The best example, if you're standing in a shade and it was heavy rain, suddenly I decided that no, there is no shelter, and I take out the shade which is there, which is protecting you during the rain. What will happen? Suddenly you are exposed to the unforced events. If you can run and take other shelter, you will be protected from rain. But if you cannot run and take the shelter, ultimately you are facing the music. You are losing your market and you become sick. You become sick, you require more expenses, more laws, and so on. And that same effect is carried liberalization. If I open more and more part of economy for foreign players, multinational companies, they have a monetary power, they have a financial capacity, they have a technological advancement, they have upper hand in terms of legalities and manpower. And this, if I do not channel in a particular way, it will lead to problem to my domestic companies and ultimately suffering in terms of employment, suffering in terms of the opportunities and growth to every industry. So when I'm talking the liberalization, I need to take care the liberalization works in smooth way and phase out. Now the second phase of LPG model is privatization. Now privatization means instead of government making an effort, lets the private people get motivated to start working or start replacing government act. For example, in India, railway has a monopoly. Now the government has asked the private people to start their practice. Some trains, like in Uttar Pradesh, some trains in Delhi, some trains in Chennai, are operated specially by the industries. The drivers are of Indian Railway, the coaches of Indian Railway, but their ticket booking, their cleaning, their maintenance are on private partnership basis. Some dams, some roads, they are constructed by the private people where you are paying tolls. So the change in infrastructure is emphasis by private. To understand the privatization, earlier there was only 29 sectors where the government is allowing private players to start the industries. And total 183 type of industries are reserved for government. Now the scenario has changed. After liberalization, when the privatization phase is started, the 162 sectors are now available for each person in India to start as a private industry, whereas 29 sectors are now reserved with the government. So more and more opportunities, more and more contribution of private equity is done in privatization. Now, why we need a privatization? The government entities are doing the system of production in typical traditional way. The lack of technical expertise and financial capacities. If I'm diverting myself to a production hub, then the funds which are available, they are deployed for productive activity, not the socio-economic growths. So taking care of people's well-being, people's medical, people's socio-economic needs will be ignored. But if private sector units, they contribute by means of their money, they contribute by advices, by making some roads, dams, factories. For example, earlier in India, we have ammunitions which are produced only by ammunition factories. Now, the companies like BHEL, Tata, Mahindra, and so forth and so on, they are involved in military supplies. So, in case of war season, we are not dependent on a single source. We have enough options where the resources are available and we have alternatives for our production. So sizable number of public sector units which are increasing and reporting loss, the government has advantage to share this unit to the private people because these private people, they have a system of profit making. They will encourage more and more profits. They will encourage more and more growth and they will be benefited regarding advantage of competitiveness. This competitiveness will increase the profitability, and the loss making units need not require government to contribute more and more. Instead of funding these loss making units, government can take out the capital, increase the private equity, and they will use this money towards creating the social elements, social construction, where the people at large will be benefited. Increase the private partnership will also lead the widespread of efficiency and hamper the ineffective or non-productive resources, because some private sector companies, when they overtake the public sector, ultimately they feel the heat. For example, when the transportation was only the government's buses, so we are at mercy of government drivers, their ways. Now, when the private peoples are operating on different routes, they are providing luxury buses. The speed, comfort, and safety, the government people also changing. They coming with Volvos, they coming with Mercedes-Benz buses, and they are coming with different facilities because they feel an heat of private sector as their competition. Similarly, when the private sector start operating in PSU or government units, they come with alternative ways where they will using the technology to make it more better, more systematic, and that can be helped to understand as one of the protocol to facilitate and gain more advantage. In India, the privatization we started around 1995, where the SIC units, what they classified as 40 type of companies, were open to private sector, and these SIC units are nothing but become an hub to feed the employees who are surpassing their productivity, sorry, underpassing their productivity. I perform, I don't perform, they didn't bother because they're getting a salary. There is no benchmark for their evaluation of performance. These units were just a cash drain people, where I'm being employed, my son will be employed, my grandson will be employed. You work or not to work, nothing is important. You are just getting a salary, you are getting a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and tenth pay. So these units were not contributing toward development. Rather, they were draining the socio-economic income, which I can rather invest other way. So when these companies were hand over to the private sector by increasing their stake in the ownership. For example, earlier the 51% stake was government. Now the stake is transferred to private sector. When stake is transferred, the first thing what government has achieved, that they get a funds. These funds they can either invest for long-term investments, or they can use the funds for managing the other resources. So once they start the managing of other resources, they will definitely being help, because in this case, the weak person is make to learn how to survive. He are making competitive. He has making effort to fight back, and they start performing well. The best example, when the privatization was initially started about the schools, the government schools was not ready to change. They follow a typical pattern. But when the private school started, they feel the heat, and then they start motivation to change. Then they start motivation to get the heat. So change in syllabus, change in infra, change in accountability has started. And this feeling is created by your privatization. Now let's understand different ways of privatization. Sorry, different ways to do privatization. The first and foremost thing in privatization is system. What I need, I need to have a systematic approach towards permissions, towards documentation, and towards ownership and benefits of ownership. Because if I'm not channelized in particular way, if I'm not channelizing in sophisticated manner, ultimately it will lead to demoralization. So the first way is to emphasis on systematic approach where documents, duration and fees for starting the partnership is reduced. Second, motivate the private sector to contribute by way of PPP, that is public private partnership, where they will build, they will maintain, and after certain duration, they will hand over to the government. So ultimately, government will not worry about construction. Government will not worry about building. Government can get a ready-made contribution. Third, they have to transfer the management or equity ownership. Take the example of bail. In bail, in bail, the people used to survive without doing anything. And the accumulated loss of bail for 3 quarters was 1,280 crores. Productivity, that's a big challenge. Output, again a big challenge. So what government does, they hand over the bail, that is Bharat Heavy Electronics Limited, partially towards Tata and Adani's. The change happen in bail is the government's funds are released. So government earns something around 584 crores from handover of equity of 23%. This equity handover makes the private people as a major shareholders. They launch and cleanest drive that okay, they embedded the new systems, they started stringent monitoring, and they work out on efficiency model where the personalized approach of luxury is shifted towards efficiency. So government has able to protect that company, started productivity which help for nation. Government get deregularized money which the equity ownership transfer approach, and the government has benefited. So equity transfer, liberalization approach, opening the sector for private people, and making ownership transfer is the different ways which government done for privatization. We already covered these points, so instead of repeating, I'll wait for 2 minutes. Please go through these points. If I want to just summarize the advantage of privatization, privatization leads to reduce the burden of government, and it turns out the non-profit making or sick units in profitability. It motivates and improve the quality and quantity outputs by seeking more and more contribution and increased interest of foreign investors, ultimately improvising the industrial sector, improvising the technical upgradation, and burden of agriculture sector is shifted because industries, when they start contributing, the opportunities of earning, opportunities of employment are increased, and that helps to grow the nation as whole. Now, what is disadvantage of privatization? They are more and less same as liberation. Because if I find some strong person is coming and he's pressurizing me, I feel the weakness. I feel lack of welfare. I feel struggle. I feel inequality and I feel the issues regarding employment. So same things, the drawback of liberalization like unemployment, sick units, dependency, and unbalanced development is same we can see as disadvantage of privatization. Only the two things here in privatization we face is class struggle and importance of national because the national sentiments like if I allow the private players to start producing ammunitions, then they will ask what about security, what about guarantee. If I collapse the system of reservation, they will ask me how you are going to protect the tribunal. Like now in education system, we got concessions for different castes. Suddenly, I approached whether there is no concession, then they will become a chaos. People will start arguing that their rights are deprived, their rights are not given. So this chaos situation is nothing but a privatization where you got a good marks, your grades are there, you get a benefits. So the protected zone, if removed, it suddenly create a socio-economic disturbances, and that is a bigger challenge and limitation of a privatization. The example which I quoted about a caste that is unbiased, just to click and meaning, I quoted the example, and I'm not either supporting or opposing the existing caste system. To give a second example, suppose in Pune, along with PMPL, the private players were allowed to run the local buses. What will happen? The local buses are become competitive. Now we are at mercy of PMPL. If I want to go from Sinhagad College to the Katras, from Katras to the Swargate, I need to have dependency. The kind of buses, their route maintenance, their driving style, their cooperation, their fees, they are at mercy of the government. And since the driver and conductor didn't bother about quality of operations, they didn't bother about condition of bus, certainly they will not hesitate and they will not be customer oriented. They will just thinking it's my job, done. You want to sit or go to hell. But when I start the private players, then I talk something about comfort, I talk about punctuality, I talk about CRM, and ultimately the people as a customer will become king and more socioeconomic changes will happen. Now, what are the examples of privatization in India? The first example is Lagan Jute Machinery Company. It is one of the traditional company having 1,283 crores capital investment by government. This jute machinery company was supplying the mechanized jutes making machines to the cooperative and rural workers, supporting them for employment. Earlier, this company was just functioning as a refinancing unit. When the government entered into privatization, the company started automation machines and which later supplied to all other people and that had changed their lives. That has instead of mechanized, the automation has reduced their efforts and increased their quality. I remember my old days in 1998. If I want the internet connection at home, I need to take the first permission from BSNL, then go to the BSNL, take the login ID and password and the permission from them. They used to give the permission of 300 MB per month, 500 MB per month. The word GB was something like absconding. Then the bandwidth was so great that if I want to upload the file more than 3 MB or 4 MB, it used to take 1 hour or 2 hours. But when we are done commercialization, the VSNL is now satellite-based internet provider to limited government organizations. And now we're starting talking about daily 1 GB or 2 GB data. We are able to watch the movies online. And this change happened when the privatization has started. The Hindustan Zinc Limited was a subsidy in Jharkhand and in Bihar, which is basically mineral iron ore producing. This subsidy was suffered losses and it was on average 785 crores per year. The output capacity was there, resources was available, but outdated machinery and lack of willingness for competition, the production was only around 45%. When the government has shifted the management of Hindustan Zinc Limited, now this same company is one of the leading zinc suppliers and they have the average profit of last 5 years is 1698 crores. So I was loss making and now average I'm making profits. This is change because the people are hit back about mentality. People are hit back about their capacity and willingness to perform. Same thing happened about hotel corporation. Same thing happened about Bharat Aluminum, where the people are not reluctant to change. They believe that I perform or perish. It didn't bother. I'm getting an earning. I'm getting an money. So they are not in that interest to perform. And when the privatization hit them, they feel the competition, they start performing, and the turn around situation occurs. Now let's talk about the crucial part, globalization. In liberalization, easy norms, easy process, easy steps. In privatization, the private people will contribute. But in globalization, not only private people, but the international players, they are receiving authorization to contribute. It is extension of privatization where people from foreign players they can invest in India, they can directly start their units and contribute towards the Indian economy. India was a major customer oriented market. So when they get opportunities, they get a contribution, they get multiple options for one product, the products become competitive, the products become cost effective, and products become a better quality. And the globalization is one of the way to make Indian companies more standardized, more competitive, and more challenging. Because if they want to survive, if they want to perform, earn the profit, then they need to support the socio-economic changes and understand the political and socio-economic factors for their conversion into profits. According to International Monetary Fund, the growing economic interdependence of countries is high. There is increase in cross-border import-export trade, resulting into much more appetite the goods and service and flow of capitals. So this has resulted in wide sharing of technology and resources. Ultimately, this has resulted in channelization of gains. This has resulted in movement where the people are having options. Now, earlier, if I want to travel from place A to B, I have ST Mavender and there are some Ashok Leyland and Bajaj buses. Now, I got Scania, I got Mercedes, I got Volvos, I got MAN buses, and so on. It is same for trucks, it is same for two-wheelers, cars, mobiles, and so on. So when I open the globalization, the world is coming together, world is coming closer, and I have multiple technical innovations, more smart practices where my businesses has advantages. And this is effect of globalization. Now, what are the features of a globalization? Globalization is expanding your horizon, your practices, your schemes, your methods towards more profitability, technical innovations, and more systematic. So the globalization has led to systemization, privatization, technical upgrading, and in the last, expanding your business at global level. Earlier, I was just thinking about what I'm smart king in my city. Now I'm thinking about a global challenge. I'm thinking about whole world. I'm thinking about the global customers. So the horizon, the market level, and the kind of operations are increased by globalization. The kind of products, the variety of products, and the physical facilities are applied the global dynamics and they are getting standardized, sophisticated, innovative, and cost effective due to globalization. The globalization has contributed towards the livelihood by change in factors of operation of raw material, machinery, technology, and finance, ultimately uplifting the living standard of every individual who's contributing. So that way, globalization has affected change in process, change in product, change in positioning a product, which contributed towards change in promotion of the people by way of their per capita income, their life dependency, and the average age of a human being. We'll discuss these foreign entry market strategies again. Now let's talk about what is the pros and cons of globalization. The first thing, this has increased the contribution made by private players. This has increased the pool of money available for industries. So this help for reducing the dependence on agriculture. This has helped the dependency to reduce the burden, to reduce the employment over agriculture. And this has contributed a well about benefiting and learning new things. So it is more units, more employment, more technology, and more contribution and balanced human development is achieved by globalization. Now, if I talk about negative impact, again you'll find same unemployment, exploitation of natural resources, gap between rich and poor, and dominance of international players. So, more or less, the globalization, privatization, and liberalization they follow the same gap. But here, the two things are added: one, transfer of natural resources, and second, it is talking about commercial and political colonies. Now, what is commercial political colonies? Suppose many British companies came to India. They started the takeover of Indian economy by means of starting their small firms, then interfering into political system, then interfering into management, and ultimately they take the control of India as a whole. And we suffered this setback for 150 years. And the people has now fear that if the privatization start, then the whole economy is exploited in the hands of private players. They will try to use as much as they will not think about socio-economic balance. They will just think how much profit I'm earning and how much profit I'm able to reserve for myself. So the orientation or interest is a question. When it's a government company, their basic interest to provide a service. When it's a private company, the basic interest to earn the profits. And this will change the focus of operations and If the focus of operation change, it will again create uh, oligopolies or cartels where there will be an issue and challenge for government to control. So to conclude, liberalization, privatization, and globalization is a chain of actions. It is one of the way to make your sectors, make your economy more competitive, more expanding the horizon. Instead of depending on one domains for employments and productivity, we are boosting them by providing competition, by introducing new players, new roles, and expanding their horizon towards global as a whole. So this way, globalization, even though has limitations, more purview, it has advantage because it is giving you the expanded scope for further progression and earning the more and more incomes. So even we oppose the globalization, it is a fact. It is going to come. It is going to contribute, and it is going to make an impact for every individual in a society. Please read this slide. The process of reforms, according to economists and social scientists, is not fast enough to achieve the goals. The Jeffrey Sachs of Harvard University, he quoted that international development, that there are reforms, there are process, which is a twin pillar for socio-economic strategies, which will lead India and develop as a competitive nations. So if I want to grow, if I want to increase the competitiveness, if I want to make the people more and more innovative, challenging, and understanding, what we need is we have to introduce new technology, we have to introduce new system, we have to introduce the competitiveness, and we have to reorganize our losses. And that way, our nation become competitive and will earn the advantage. When I will be successfully phase out the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, I can achieve the socio-economic reforms, and dependence is on commitment rather than survival. So fittest is always the winner. Similar way, when I go with the LPG model, my companies will struggle, but they will, if successful, they will survive and surpass all the challenges and issues. And in the end, I am having a benefit of being competitive, being learned, and being sophisticated to have a strong pillar of industry supporting an agro-based economy, which will lead to have one more dimension, not only agriculture, but the industry and agro-process industry, where the development will go hand in hand with cultural reforms. Our policies, which were traditional 1960s, 70s, and 80s, are more and more protective. The liberalization model has led a change in industrialization where we are boosting the confidence of industries. We are allowing them to take over the more and more sectors, more and more different types of industries by liberalizing the restrictions, the quotas and tariffs. So we are making them to feel the heat of market and make themselves competitive. This has led to create a boost in economy, and we are able to be a competitive, because if I didn't face a music, I'm not changing myself. I get a pinch, I'll change myself, and once I change myself, I will be the strongest pillar to support, to move, to further understand the world as a whole. So liberalization, privatization, and globalization, They had the limitations, but moreover, more than the limitations, they has advantage of performing well, making competitives, and have options over agriculture incomes. We started our export with raw material and minerals, and now we are having 26% contribution of IT sector, 33% contribution by non by engineering goods, and the dominance of agrobase is reduced. We are no more that traditional country where people are just walking barefoots. We are now that country which have four-lane roads, five-lane roads, more airports, and more technology because we are having more and more LPG contributions. I'm not saying gas, I'm saying about liberalization, privatization, and globalizations. Our profits, our income after all expenses had drastically increased. I'm not going this, but to just give an idea, when we are started liberalization, that time we are having the cars around 30,538. When we started the privatization, we have cars 3,76,000. And when we started the globalization, I have the cars 7 lakhs. So growth is almost 25 times than it was the previous. Why I'm showing these numbers? Because these numbers will you understand what is an impact of LPG model. So it's almost 9 a.m. Sorry, 9 p.m. So I'll stop for the day. We'll study the impact based on industrial sectors tomorrow. Then we'll talk about the system of international finance and we'll discuss cases about international finance. So thank you all of you being part of this session. Hope you are continue your learnings. I'm stopping the recording for some purpose.